just wanted to welcome everybody to the panel. I'm going to kind of moderate, as it were, the panel, and hopefully you get out of it what you came for. We're going to probably talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. So obviously we have a mic there, and if anybody has questions, you just line up behind the mic, and we go from there. So in the back of the room we have Matt. He's also on staff here, so he's helping out. So if you have any questions, let us know. The only thing we ask at the panels is that you do not live stream the panels. So some people want to Periscope or want to, YouTube the panels. Please, you guys all pay good money to be here. We don't want to give somebody free, random place. So, but without further ado, I'm going to toss it to you to kind of tell us who you are, and then I'll jump in and ask some randomly not random questions, and you can tell us what your experiences are.
Cool. Just first off, this is the Zero to Publishing panel, just making sure everybody's where they're meant to be. My name is Eloy and I'm the owner and operator of Third Eye Games, which maybe some of you have heard of. We've done 7 game lines up to this point, which include Apocalypse Prevention Incorporated, the Ninja Crusade. We also have Part-Time Gods, Mermaid Adventures, Camp Myth the RPG, Ampere 1, which is our super setting, as well as Infestation, an RPG of Bugs and Heroes. So all of those have come out. We usually release a new RPG every year that we've been in business. We have been in business since 2008. So I actually came here and did this panel 2 years ago here at DragonCon. And that was probably one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life, because it was just like this, where I was up here and it was just me, and it was really fun actually afterwards, but during I was scared out of my gourd. But basically, actually, show of hands real quick. Who's here because they want to publish their own game? All right. No, definitely. Give your round of applause there. Who's here because you have some awesome game idea and you're looking for someone else to publish it? All right, so there's a few of those guys too. I am definitely going to be more for the first crowd, because I'm definitely one of the people who I had done freelancing for a few years. I did some with Vajra Enterprises, and I co-authored a game called Kid World, and I did some work for Paradigm Concepts on their Witch Hunter The Invisible World game line, and then I said, this is pretty easy, I'm just going to do this myself. Plus, I got paid more. If you publish your own stuff, you get a larger cut of the profit. So that was my main motivation, was to kind of take this and make it into something that I can do full-time, which actually I started doing my gaming full-time in 2013, where I was able to quit my job, and now I can pay my bills by selling games and writing stuff, which is an amazing feeling. So, do we want to go to established questions now, or I can continue rambling?
Well, let's start here. What did you do prior to getting into gaming, and did it influence your move into gaming?
You mean as far as day job?
Yeah. Okay. Or night job, if you know.
Well, I was gonna say. Okay, so my day job had nothing to do with me getting into RPGs. I worked for Nokia, and I did technical support, and I wrote my first game in between phone calls. So that was fun. And then I ended up working with a t-shirt company for a while, who was nice enough that they let me kind of take off time when I needed to go to conventions and whatnot. Neither of which really influenced me as a publisher, except for the fact that I get really good deals on t-shirts. But before the professional writing, I used to write for free. I used to write for a online White Wolf zine called Ex Libris Nocturnus way back in the day. My name was first Oni, and I was one of the admin on there. And I actually got a whole bunch of other interested writers together. This was my very first big project. Other people who also volunteered their time, and we wrote up a supplement called World of Darkness Shanghai. And it was basically everything that existed in the World of Darkness, but how they operated in Shanghai. It was a city guide, and it was amazing for a fan thing. You know, like I look back on it, I'm like, it had its issues, but it was amazing as just like a little fan book that me and some of my friends kind of just threw together. So that was my first really big thing. But I wrote so much material for White Wolf specifically, and then I started to try and branch out. And then I had my own ideas for where I wanted to go mechanically with some things that just weren't there in the industry. So I gave it my best shot at trying to make my own game. So I got together about $800 for art to pay some of my art friends way less than they were worth, and I did all of the writing myself. I taught myself how to use InDesign, and I also didn't edit. I only edited myself, so that first game is poorly edited because you need an editor. And then I just kind of threw it all together, and it kind of worked. And that was actually my very first game, Apocalypse Prevention Inc., that I released in 2008. This year we actually released a second edition of Apocalypse Prevention Inc., which is way better because I had a team of people working with me as opposed to just me doing it myself. Not to say that doing it all yourself is not a very viable way to go. That's kind of how I've always tackled things in my professional career, is that whatever it is that needs to get done, I learn how to do it. And so that even if I hand that off to somebody else later, I can double check them and I can know what I'm talking about when I'm talking with them. So that's a big deal for me, is to kind of know all of the ins and outs, all of the intricacies of the business, even if I end up hiring somebody else to actually handle it.
Okay, so do you use a tool or set of tools to help you organize this? I mean, do you have a project manager, or do you use like outlining software? I mean, how technically do you go into, before I write X, or does it just kind of flow and then you kind of put it into place as you see?
Good question. It's actually more of the second. So what I do is I have a pretty good spreadsheet of all of my current ongoing projects, of everything that I want to be working on, everything that I am working on, everything that maybe is near completion. I have a spreadsheet, but a lot of the time I'm really kind of just inspired to write, I guess that's the way to put it. But so, I usually have at least 4 or 5 different projects going on at any one given time, and whatever I'm most inspired to write on that day, I write on that day. I do write every day, which is also a big deal. Even if I don't write every day, I'll work on an outline, or I'll do something, concerned with the writing to help me write the next day, because it's all about, writing, because now I have to pay my bills with it. But no, I'm actually very much, I kind of go with the flow. That's why sometimes I'll announce a game and then it won't come out for a couple of years, not because it took me 2 years to really do that game, but while I was working on that game, I got inspired to release a different game. So I released that game instead. I'm actually still in the works on a game called Sinister, which is my dark Pokemon monster hunting game that I have working on. But while I was working on that one, I decided, hey, I have a really cool idea for a supers mechanic, so then I released this game instead. So it's not like it's wasted effort, it's just, it's weird for me to kind of direct my flow. Whenever I am actually working and I don't have any particular inspiration to anything, I actually usually have a weekly schedule of, I'm gonna work on this today, I'm gonna work on that today, tomorrow's this, and I kind of move forward that way.
Okay. All right, so we kind of know the inspiration, we know the process. How did you go about actually getting the book on the shelf?
Okay, so that's kind of it's weird because when I had my very first book, and it was all complete, and I had print copies, I got it together with Lulu.com, which I don't technically suggest because their prices are outrageous. But Lulu.com was where I first started. And because they had a print on demand, they did short runs, it was easy to do. So I went to my local game shops and obviously tried to pitch it there, and a couple of them kind of carried it. But I think the biggest thing that ended up happening to me was I tried to call Alliance, and I tried to call ACD, and I tried to call all these different companies that are distributors, and a lot of them said, well, if you only have the one book, then you're not ready for distribution. Like, call us back when you have 3 or 4 books under your belt, and then maybe we'll talk about ordering a handful of each of them. So that was disheartening, to say the least, because I was very excited to work with it. But what I ended up doing was I contacted a company called Studio 2 Publishing. And what Studio 2 does is they are kind of a fulfillment kind of middleman. So what they did and what they do, so write that down, Studio 2 Publishing, if you guys are interested in this sort of service. If you are looking for someone to help you get your books in stores, what they will do is if you only have 1 book or 2 books, they'll lump it together with all of the other companies that they represent. And so it's like your books are now their 100th and their 101st. So you guys can get into Alliance and ACD and all these other big companies. But what they also do, and this was a big one for me, is that they will help you with your printing. So if you're like, I don't have money for a giant print run, they'll say, well, how about this? We'll pay for the print run. Obviously, they'll take a larger cut, but it will allow you to actually get your books in stores. And they're not the only company that does it. There's a couple of others. I know Indie Press Revolution is a good one to go to as well. And they will assist you with getting not only your game in stores, but also at a variety of different conventions that they visit. So those are 2 really good outlets that I recommend. There are others, but those are the 2 I recommend because some others are kind of sketchy.
What's the name of the second one?
Indie Press Revolution. .com.
So, to kind of piggyback on that,
Sure.
with the .com, do you recommend or do you have your own site and you're able to publish direct to consumer through your own? And I guess secondarily to that, do you use any of the other publishing systems like Amazon or iTunes or any of that kind of stuff?
So when I started, I was basically strictly Studio 2. That's how I got my PDF sold. That's how I got my books sold. Now, again, I started in 2008. So this was before Drive-Thru. I think Drive-Thru came out in like 2009. So then Drive-Thru came out, no, I think they came out in 2008, like late 2008. So then when Drive-Thru came out, I was like, well, sure, I'll put my games on there. And amazingly, I just started to make lots of my money back because I put my PDFs on there. They are kind of the Amazon of our industry. Is if you have your stuff on Drive-Thru, even if people aren't even looking for it, you'll get a few impulse buys, if nothing else. So I threw it on Drive-Thru RPG Now, One Book Source, whatever you want to call it, and they were able to kind of make me my $800 back really quickly. So I broke even very fast on my very first book. So that was fun. So what I ended up doing after that was I started my own website, which is actually very important, guys. Definitely need to have your own website so that you can start utilizing the SEO, Google's SEO. Get a good name, make sure it's not a name that somebody else is already using. I actually just this past week had a thing where a comic shop called Third Eye Comics was going to open up their own gaming store and was going to call it Third Eye Games, which makes sense for their branding, but I already kind of have that. So we had a nice conversation, and they're just going to change the name a little bit so that it doesn't infringe on my name, so that we're not butting heads. So and in most times, most people are nice enough that they will just, he called me and he's just like, I'm so sorry, I even carry your games, I have no clue how I even forgot that. It's just like, yeah, I know, it's okay. So I would say definitely pick a good name that's going to be striking and get that URL. You want to, put yourself in as a business, even if it's just doing business as sole proprietorship. You want to definitely file it with your state so that you are official. That costs like $50. So it's like, you just do it. So definitely do that, but the website's very important for you to start getting your web presence, make a Facebook page, do a Twitter, just do everything that you can to kind of stamp that and say, that's mine. So that would definitely be the first suggestion, and I think I rambled on a little bit too much on that one before I forgot the second part of your question.
iTunes, Play Store.
Oh yes, okay,
Amazon.
so, thank you. So after I had Studio 2 doing my publishing and my printing for a while, I was able to get enough money and experience that I was able to kind of call up the printing company, which is called Lightning Source. So if you want to write that down, lightningsource.com. That's a really good company to contact. You can get a personal relationship with them so that I no longer had to go through a middleman in order to get my books printed. That meant that I made a lot more money on every sale because Studio 2 is no longer taking their cut of the printing and everything. So that was good. And recently I started putting stuff up on Amazon. That's actually pretty easy to do. If you go to createspace.com, that's their publishing kind of site. And if you go to createspace.com, they have limited, like you can't do hardcover there, and they have limited sizes and stuff. But if your book is, 6x9 or 8.5 by 11, which is kind of what, the typical stuff that we have in our industry is, then they can take care of you. And actually, their quality is good, not wonderful. It's not like the best, but it's good, and they're quick and they're cheap. So that would be CreateSpace. But also what CreateSpace does is, as soon as you're in there, that puts it on Amazon's website. So then you can start selling your books through Amazon, and then it automatically has Prime attached to it if it's through CreateSpace, because they just print it and ship it and whatever. So it's it became a pretty good kind of third revenue stream, because I have DriveThruRPG. I'm technically fourth, because I have DriveThruRPG, I have my own website, I have Studio 2 who still sells stuff to my stores, and then I have Amazon. So it's good to have multiple revenue sources.
So I don't want to dwell on, the whole online scenario.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something that kind of brought up something else, and that was, how do you go about, and this is kind of a hard to put into words question, but especially with the other company infringing and that stuff. So do you, especially since you write mechanics as well, do you patent that, or is it just copyright? And then how do you, is there a way to search whether or not someone else has the idea of Superman before you go through and create Superman?
I would say that there's no like real way to do it. The thing with copywriting is that you can't copyright mechanics. So if you said roll a d10, and if it's a 10, then that's awesome, and if it's a 1, that sucks. I could use that same exact system as long as I rewrote it, and I said, 1s suck and 10s are awesome. And then now that system's mine, just because I took your system and rewrote it. And that's kind of the thing, is a lot of people are like, I don't want to share ideas, because then what if somebody steals it? It's just like everybody steals from everybody, and it's okay. So no, it's true. Everybody steals from everybody. Everybody borrows pleasantly from other people. Inspired by. That's
the difference between taking from someone and taking from everyone is art.
Right. Now, the thing about it is if you follow, say, Palladium's example, is that they go Palladium, TM, Glitterboy, TM, Cyber Knight, TM. Like, they spend hundreds of dollars just to coin these terms, which I guess is good for them. When I was writing my superhero game, I found out that the term super soldier is actually trademarked by Marvel. So using the term super soldier is technically trademark infringement. So, so it's just little things like that. Now, is that something that they might litigate over? I'm not going to take that chance because I'm not going to go up against Marvel. So there's that.
Or Disney.
No, exactly. Oh gosh, no, definitely not over Disney. So, but there's a certain line there is when you're dealing with copywriting, a lot of the time, as soon as you've published it, like it's copyrighted, like you put a little copyright notice in there, says all this stuff belongs to me, and that's cool. But again, somebody could take that same mechanic and just rewrite it, and now it belongs to them, which is a sad thing in our. I mean, it's sad in our industry that you can steal so easily, but that's just kind of the way it is. Now, unless you do certain terms, and we'll get to your question in just a second, unless you do certain terms, because a good example of that is the tap magic, right? So turning a card on its side, tap. No other game can call it tap because they trademarked the term tap for turning your card to the side. Now, that means that you have other terms now. They call it exhaust, or they call it, whatever any other company wants to call it, but they cannot call it tap, or Wizards will attack them.
So
another company you don't want to go up against, exactly.
Well, one's Hasbro, and one's Disney.
Exactly.
Right? So it's kind of. So in the last of my questions, and then we'll get to yours, but another revenue stream that is kind of, it's reared its head both ugly and beautiful in the last 5 years is Indiegogo and Kickstarter,
yes.
Right? So what are your dealings, if you've ever dealt with, ever done? Would you recommend it as a way to start? So in those.
So, all right, so Kickstarter. I have many things to say about Kickstarter.
And we have a panel specifically dealing with Kickstarter, so I don't want to.
Isn't that going on right now, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys can't
So
see
I
that
need-
one, so I'm giving you a little flavor from that one
Yeah.
as well.
So I need to really inform this because they took time out of listening to them.
This is how we get the duel at the same time.
I wonder who's on the other panel now. I'm like, who am I competing with? Wait a minute.
Thomas is.
Wait, no, Thomas is supposed to be over here. See, they must have double booked him.
I don't think Thomas is over
Okay.
there. I think they're doing Robert Schwab probably is over there.
Ah, Rob, yes. Yeah, Rob just ran a really good Kickstarter.
Awesome.
I actually have run 12 successful Kickstarters. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Actually, the 3 books I have up here all were Kickstarters. The difference between my Kickstarter campaigns and ones like Rob Schwab's and Monty Cook's is that they can ask for $60,000 and get it and then some. Whereas I asked for, $10,000 and then I get it and then that was my goal. That's what I got. Sounds good to me. Because I'm still pretty small press comparatively. So Kickstarter is, I almost don't suggest Kickstarter as the first thing you're gonna do. I would say Kickstarter should be the second thing that you do. Meaning, you should release something that people can kind of grab onto, something that people can start to identify you as. So like even if it's just like a free adventure for something, or it's a little 2-page game that kind of gets some buzz, so that when you say, hey, now I'm going to do a Kickstarter for this thing, they go, oh, you were the guy who did that one thing. Well, yeah, I'll back that. That sounds good. There are a lot of people who go on a Kickstarter and don't realize that it's part of the community. So Kickstarter is, like, I've seen people who go on there and they're just like, we love Kickstarter and we love what you guys do, and so back our project. And then I look at their project and they haven't backed anything They've never made a project before, and they've never backed anybody else's project, and I'm just like, oh, so you're here for money, you're not to be part of the community. So it is one of those things where it's important to realize that that's the case. So you need to be involved in it, back a few projects, see how the process works before you just jump right into it. Also, it will help you gain that little bit of cred when somebody goes, you know, do you even know anything about Kickstarter? Well, yeah, I backed these couple things. Oh, well, that sounds great. Like to date, I think I've backed like over 100 projects over the last few years, you know, usually for PDFs and whatnot, because I like to just throw money at people for no reason. But no, Kickstarter is really awesome. So the interesting thing, though, that you guys need to pay attention to when it comes to Kickstarter is to definitely make sure your budgets are together. So if you guys are figuring on Kickstarter, there are a lot of things that go into that. So there's the writing costs, the layout costs, the art costs. There's also the shipping costs. There's also international shipping costs, which are exorbitantly more, as well as Kickstarter taking their fee. There's also, you need to factor in any kind of additional you know, fees or titles that you need to do. For instance, like the actual just printing it is one thing, printing the books, but you have to pay for setup for your printer. If your books are getting printed overseas, you have to pay for additional shipping on that part. And you have to make it all work, because that's actually where a lot of people fall flat on Kickstarter, is that they just, they mess up the numbers. They do a lot of guessing. Like, take your time and really try and get the numbers down correctly before you launch that Kickstarter. I would say, at least. I mean, that's just my own little thing.
All right.
So yeah, I think that's good. I could always say more about Kickstarter, but let's go to questions. And if the questions are about Kickstarter, we
If
can
you check the mic, make sure that it's on.
It should be on. You checked it?
I did, but I think I may have turned it off. There's a button at the bottom near the base that you can turn.
Oh, no, the base of the mic.
On the mic itself, sorry. Yeah, just tap it. Okay, perfect. So,
Sir, you actually have the first question if you want to. He raised his hand earlier.
So in regards to game mechanics,
Yes.
Game mechanics are game mechanics. Somebody's going to steal over here, somebody's going to steal over here. Is it safe to say then that what drives the marketability of a game isn't so much the mechanics, but it's how the whole concept fits together, it's the narrative, and it's the presentation, it's the art, it's the layout, it's the attractiveness of the package itself. That's the thing that's, is it fair to say, more important than worrying about guarding one's mechanics, but the entire package? Is that fair to say?
I would say that if I said a concept out loud right now, every game designer in here can take that concept and would produce a completely different game out of it. So like if you just say, I have an idea for this and this and this, like that's cool, but it's all going to be in the implementation. And that does include the presentation, the art, the explanation of the rules, because I've seen some of the same rules just explained poorly in another game where they're explained well, even though they're exactly the same. You know, because there's a lot of games out there that have percentile. There's a lot of D10 pool games. There's a lot of D20, you know, games that use a D20 game, D6 pools. You know, like I have a game called Mermaid Adventures, which I wrote for, you know, families and whatnot, and it uses pools of D6s. Now, you think of that and you think Shadowrun, because Shadowrun uses tons of pools of D6s. But they do work completely different, and that's kind of the thing. So you can't just say, hey, my game uses this and it does this kind of thing, and think that you kind of understand what the game is actually. So it is part of a package. Me personally, I'll be sold on a setting way before I'll be sold on mechanics. So if that has an interesting theme or an interesting kind of take on something, I'll be a lot more likely to buy it than I would if it said we have awesome mechanics. And I'm just like, well, I have lots of games that have awesome mechanics. So, you know, that's my thought at least.
Yeah, and a perfect example of that would, I mean, a very famous one would be Ravenloft, right? I mean, everybody's heard of Dracula. So, you know, taking it and going further, everybody can have a different interpretation of that. So
yeah, Ravenloft sells because you say it's Dracula in D&D, and people go, what? Go ahead.
So you had mentioned that you create a game a year or something like that.
Yes.
At what point do you think it's better to focus on one setting and pool more resources into that, building a community, extra editions or versions, or branching off to some other market like toys or something like that? When do you think, as a small company, it's okay to do that? Because I'm finding that I can spend a lot of time on something I personally believe in, but at some point you have to understand if the market is going to reflect what you think is great.
Yeah.
Right?
No, totally.
Yeah.
I think, in my own personal opinion, I'm always looking to experiment, and I'm always looking to try new things, which is why it's hard for me personally to kind of stick to one thing. I remember I released Apocalypse Prevention Inc., which is espionage horror, and then I released Ninja Crusade, which is like high-flying martial arts, and then I released Part-Time Gods, which is like divine beings doing all this stuff, and then I released Mermaid Adventures, and people would laugh. They would be like, that seems like a weird combination, and no, like I just wanted to try something new. I had already done more traditional games. I had done kind of the comedy flavor. I had done the horror flavor. I did the martial arts. So I wanted to try something new. So that's kind of my stance on it. Now, if at any point I decided I wanted, I release one new game a year, but that's not to say that I don't support the ongoing game lines as well. So like my Supers game, Ampere 1, I just released Ampere 2, which is the first source book for it. We'll be releasing Ampere 3 the next year, so each of my different games does also get support. But I also think that it's all part of your original goal when you start your company. Because again, that was why I said, like, who wants to publish their game and who wants somebody else to publish their game? Because making the decision to be a publisher is saying, I want to start a small business. And that entails a lot more than I want to create a game and then hand it off to somebody. So when I started my company, I said, I want to be like the next White Wolf. I want to have several game lines with lots of source books, and I want people to be able to come to my company and be able to find something that appeals to them. So even if you don't like one of my games, you'll like another one of my games, which is why all of my games are wildly different from each other. But that's, again, maybe that's working against me. Who knows?
All right, you're up.
So I saw a little while ago you made a Savage Worlds version of
ABI, yeah.
Of ABI. Can you talk a bit about creating your own, the merits of creating your own system versus licensing / using putting yourself under somebody else's mantle? Because I'm looking to the games I'm looking at right now are under Fate, and I know for like the thing I'm working on, it definitely makes sense, but I'm just yeah.
No, yeah. So I think using an established system, like I am kind of a mechanics guy, so I really enjoy kind of fiddling with stuff and making my own systems. But when I played a bunch of Savage Worlds one year, and I just played it tons, and then I said, this would actually work really well for, API. So I started working on, kind of translating it over, contacted Pinnacle, made sure that they were okay with it. That's obviously a big thing, because some companies have a different licensing agreement than other companies. Pinnacle is just you contact them, and as long as they think your idea is cool and that you're going to be able to pull it off in a way that doesn't dilute their brand, then they're cool with it. Whereas I actually don't know the Fate rules. I believe those are just OGL, like common. Yeah, so you can just do it. Like, so there isn't anything stopping you from doing a Fate, whereas with Pinnacle, you actually have to get their permission to make a Savage Worlds game. So it is slightly different. Going underneath somebody's banner, it's kind of odd because I never really, I'm kind of indie in that way. Like, I didn't really do it to be under somebody else's banner. I did it just to express myself in a different way. So I thought that their rules really complemented my game line, so I went with it. And it got me some additional fans, which is cool because they have a very good community. And still sells well, so that's nice. But I would say the process of creating your own system versus adapting it to another system is worlds apart. Adapting rules to fit into somebody else's mindset and design philosophy takes a lot of time. So I wrote API originally in about 6 months, and it took me about a year and a half to translate what I had in API over to Savage Worlds. Just because I didn't want to shoehorn it, and I really wanted it to really fit what I wanted and what API is, and also be as Savage Worlds as possible. So I didn't want to mess with their brand. So I would say it's even harder to do that. And I have a house system, so I'll have a house system and API system. Okay, so I need to take that system now and use it for this new game, and that will take tons more time than if I was just to create a brand new system. But everybody's brains work differently. So
Yeah, and the good thing about coming to conventions, and it doesn't really matter which one you go to, but as long as they have dealers, I mean, I'm sure Jody and Clint are probably here from Savage World. So, I mean, you can always meet the people who are the publishers here and create that relationship.
Yeah.
Because that's, I'm a professional developer, and so I go to conventions that are $5,000–6,000, and I can get the same content of what's going on up here online for free by the convention, but it's the contact that you get with the people that are there that really help you along the lines of publishing your work. So.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. As I wondered how open-ended it is that you said you can't copyright the game mechanics unless you have a specific thing like tapping and magic. So apples to apples and Cards Against Humanity, that's the exact same thing. But then there's Ghettopoly that got sued by Monopoly. So
Yes.
I wondered if, and I have heard that some companies will sue you for the sake of suing you, even though they can't really win, but to put you out of business.
Yeah.
And that
Patent trolls.
possibly is what happened in that case. So I wondered if you had any experience with this with your business, if you've been sued or gone through suing someone or at least confronting someone, and could someone just go and make, instead of Settlers of Catan, could they make Kettlers of Satan?
Like kettlers.
Great question.
So it is a great question. I have not been sued or had to sue anybody, which is great. Like I said, this past week I actually dealt with that, but it was very brief and very friendly because the guy honestly had made a mistake. So we kind of just worked it out over the phone. We talked for maybe 20 minutes and then it was over. So it was very stressful for those 20 minutes, but it worked out. But no, see, the thing about the copywriting is, again, the Ghettopoly thing, because I remember that as well, was that they copied the board. The board looked like a Monopoly board, and that's what Monopoly was mad about, right? Because all that did is then it associated the very well-known look of the Monopoly board to them instead of to Monopoly. And Monopoly's like, nah, no thank you. So a lot of the visual things, people will get you for logos. People will get you for logos and for anything that's visual way faster than they'll get you for something that's written, obviously, because then that requires that they read it.
A perfect example of this, if I may, from my history, is David Kinzer. I don't know if you know Kinzer and Company.
I know the company.
Yeah,
but what
so the scenario there, David Kinzer is an international patent lawyer. That was what he was done. But basically, when Dungeons & Dragons tried to publish his stuff here, it said Dungeons & Dragons, Kingdom of Calamar, if anybody remembers Kingdom of Calamar. It actually said Dungeons & Dragons on it because it was licensed for them, for the United States. They sent it overseas, still saying Dungeons & Dragons. He sued them because he didn't have international rights. So the basic judgment he got was anything he published, he could put Dungeons and Dragons on it. They couldn't say a word. So, you know, you've got to really look at your audience and especially who you're dealing with. Like he said, logos are one thing, fonts are another. Fonts are paid for in a lot of cases. So you've got to really be careful what you're doing. Please, regardless of whether it's free, just don't use Comic Sans, if you will, please. But, you know, you got to really kind of dive into other cases that may be similar. So in that, I would probably do yourself a favor, look up David Kinzer / WOTC, and yeah, so, and there's tons of literature out there about that kind of explain how that kind of goes. Is it kind of related to that?
It is immediately related to that.
Okay. So just say it.
You can just say it real quick.
You cannot patent mathematics, which is why you can't patent systems per se. It goes to that whole terminology versus mechanics thing, but you can't patent cryptography systems, you can't patent all these different things because they are math, and by US law, math is not patentable, full stop. I'm not a lawyer, but this is something that the employers at my previous company love to drill into my head about what can and can't be patented.
There you go.
So there we go. Math is not patentable, nor understandable for most. So go ahead.
All right.
So to expand on that question, actually, what resources did you use to learn about the legal issues? And like when you were dealing with contracts, did you use a lawyer? Did you just read through it and try to understand it on your own?
So what I ended up doing was, because I had done some freelancing in the past, I kind of stole other companies' contracts, read them over, made sure I kind of got it. I did a little bit of paralegal college courses when I was earlier and younger in my life, so I kind of got it a little bit, so I didn't need to consult. But the contracts, you know, obviously being very important. If you don't have kind of a background in kind of understanding the legal jargon, definitely I would suggest talking to a lawyer, even if it's just, hey, just check this out and make sure that this is all legal for this to happen. Now, again, most of the time though, if you have a contract that another company has already used, they probably already asked a lawyer. So there are some corners to be cut there. So.
Hopefully, contracts aren't copyrightable.
No, I don't think they are. Who knew?
Unless they have math in them.
Actually, you cannot copyright a contract because it changes based on the legal jargon that's in each individual contract.
There you go.
So now you know.
But I'm
The
gonna
more you
continue-
know.
I'm going to continue the legal discussion because I'm going to hit you up on the one that everybody hates.
Okay.
Parity law.
All right.
If you're working on a game that's intentionally parodying multiple franchises that are out there,
Mhm.
well-known franchises that may or may not be represented here at DragonCon, do you have the information on the process in order to make sure that you're covered so that way those franchises will not necessarily come at you?
I do not. That is not something that I have. However, you might be able to talk to that gentleman in the back because he's raising his hand. He might have information for you.
The rule on that is essentially you can get away with almost anything with parody rights unless you actually financially damage the name of what you're parodying. So like Spaceballs, cool. But if you did like Star Wars, the crappy space thing, something like that, they would probably review. So
I'm assuming that's under the option of you don't use the word Star Wars and space battles. You know?
Yeah, don't do that.
You are not allowed to create a game parodying Weird Al. It's against the rules. It's like putting a dimensional hole inside of a bag of holding. It doesn't.
Hello. So a lot of the resources and advice you gave is great, but a lot of it seems specific to rule sets.
Okay.
And I was wondering if you have any resources or suggestions for just like board games, like a deck building game or something along the lines.
So it's resources in terms of like where to get printing and where to publish.
printing.
So there's a company called gamecrafter.com, which is really good for if you're doing prototypes and whatnot, because you can order just one copy if you want, or as many as you can order as many as you want, but it's not really great for you to order more than 500. If you're going to order more than 500, you might as well just go to a real printer.
They're great for a tight budget.
Exactly. Gamecrafter.com. Also, drive-through. I talk a lot about drive-through RPG, but they also have drive-through cards, which is if your game is particularly card-based, they have pretty good card printing. But Gamecrafter is where they'll help you with the board, they'll help you with the packaging, they'll help you with the meeples and all that stuff. So I would say go to that one while you're working on your prototypes, at least.
So now we have a living sriracha bottle going to ask a question. Outstanding.
Hi, I'm Spicy. I got the dreaded two-parter. The first calls back to your previous discussion of revenue streams. You mentioned about 4 separate ones. So the first part of the question is, do you price differently based on the amount of revenue you're getting back, because different streams have different cuts?
Right.
And do you mask that by being like, discount coupons if you buy from my website, or if you see me in person somewhere, which brings me to the second part, conventions. Is conventions the 5th for you? I know that you are coming into your 3rd year for the Salty Bacon, which is, I believe you own that one too, right?
Right.
So, first part, do you price differently for streams? Second part, is con another stream for you?
All right, really good questions. So I would say, yes, I do price differently. I give a 10% discount on my website. And also if you see me at a con, then, if you're like, hey, if I buy 4 books, can I get some money off? Like, yeah, sure, whatever. So I had a guy who was like, I really want to buy like the whole game line of this. And he's just like, how much is that? I'm like, it's about 120. He's like, can I give you 100? Like, yeah, you're buying everything. Like, sure, why not? I'm not really losing out on that much, because it costs like $5 to print a book. So yeah. Yes, I do price differently for my own website, but then I kind of leave the prices differently on some of my other revenue streams, because like through distribution, they get a 50% cut like right off the bat, that hurts. So I make a lot less money getting them into stores, and yet at the same time, I kind of still find it important to get them into stores, because that's another audience that not necessarily, if you're buying it in a store, that means you're not buying it online.
And building brand recognition.
Exactly, and you're building more brand recognition. But no, it sells for the same on Amazon and drive-through. They sell for the same, but I do get different percentages based on that, because their markets are all set up differently.
So on your site, do you like promote those differently, or do you not even link to them?
No, on my site, I say buy it from my site. Yeah, I don't link in between them. It seems weird to do that. But yes, and I guess you're right. Conventions would technically be my 5th. Like, I have a whole suitcase full of books here that, whenever I come to DragonCon, people are like, hey, can I check out your games? Yeah, sure, go for it. Yes, so I would say conventions is definitely a 5th. So yeah, good question.
Okay, so can you compare and contrast your editing process between your first book and your latest book?
Sure. So my first book was, I wrote it, and then I kind of cursory glanced through it to make sure it kind of looked right, and I thought it did, but it really didn't. So, it wasn't bad enough that you couldn't understand it, but there were just so many glaring errors, because you should never edit yourself. My latest one was that I wrote it, got all the drafts in. I do a content edit on everything, send it back to all the writers so that they can do their second drafts. Then all of those are sent over to my core, my editing manager, who then sends it out to a couple of other editors that she works with. She does a cursory glance over everything that they do when it comes back to her. And then when I'm laying it out, then afterwards I print it all out, and then I do one more glance over it. I mean, so we're way more efficient nowadays. So everything is just better.
And so these employees are yours? Or
These are, so technically Third Eye Games has 2 employees. Not real employees though, but I have my marketing manager, who I do pay hourly, but he only has a certain amount of hours that he can do every month. And then I have my managing editor, and she's kind of in charge of that, and she gets paid per project, like a lump sum per project. So, you know, and they aren't technically employees, but I have contracts with them that say I'm using them for those things and no one else. So, you know, they're basically employees, but yeah. Go for it.
Second question.
Okay.
So, you know, earlier you talked about your first game and that you spent like $800 on artists.
Yes.
And I have no artistic skill whatsoever, and I'm just wondering, like, how does that process look like more in depth for your first game? Like, especially if you don't really have a budget to go like, here's money.
So being that I had worked with, again, Ex Libris Nocturnus, one of the other admins, her name was Kat Wild, and she lived across the hall from me. And and she's an artist, and I said, how much would it cost for me to get like 10 pieces? And she's like, I don't know, like $20, whatever. I was like, thank you, that sounds great. No, $20 per piece. Oh, well, I guess that's still good. So she got me. We had a couple of other artists that were big on the forums, and I ended up tapping a guy named Tazio Betten, who's big now. He actually does a lot of art for Fate and stuff now. But at the time, I kind of talked it over with him. I made a couple of concessions to his art style So in the very first API book, he is very much a fan of drawing women with very large boobs. And he basically said, I was like, well, I kind of don't want that. And he's just like, well, if you let me kind of do what I want to do, then I'll give you another cut on the price. And I'm just like, I guess do that then? I mean, it's like, because again, like my first book, everything was out of pocket. Like nowadays, I'm just like, no, change that stuff. No, yeah.
So the women were cheaper?
What's that? Yes. No, yes, you're correct. But no, they just, and if you look at that book, it's just like, it's so out of place. And it's like, I'm kind of ashamed, like going back and looking at it. It's just like, really? I can't believe I let him do that one. So there's that, and then I had another artist that I picked off of DeviantArt, and I said, hey, I have like 5 pieces left, are you interested? And that was my first real kind of dealing with artists that weren't my friends. And that was fun. It was a good experience. Like now I do it like every day, so it's kind of crazy. Is this directly related to what we're talking? Okay.
I just wanted to say that Voltaire told me once that he does his art shopping at conventions. He'll walk around the artist gallery, find things that like speak to him or to his book that he's working on, and then he'll like talk to the artists and see if they're cool. And so if you're gonna go to conventions anyway.
Yeah. No, I do that quite a bit as well. Get business cards and have face-to-face meetings. I am much more likely to hire somebody if I've met them in person than if I haven't. Like if I have 2 equal resumes but I met this person and I know they're cool, I'll go with them in a heartbeat. So that's why conventions are super important, because getting that face-to-face time with publishers and people who will hire you that's why. So
yeah, Todd Lockwood, Jeff Easley, those guys are a couple buildings away. Probably not going to be for your first book, unless you're really setting an art budget.
Or unless you, like if you do a really successful Kickstarter and you're able to budget it in and the people want that art in your book, then that's a good way to do it. But never be afraid to negotiate. I guess that's a really good point when it comes to artists. Because I will talk to artists and they'll be like, well, usually I charge about $100 for this piece, and I say, I got like 60, will that work? And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever, 60 works.
And
like,
they love the idea. I mean, they love the idea of what you're working on. Not to kind of go off topic here, but it's art. Gerald Brom, probably one of my favorite artists of all time, did all of Dark Sun and did it for a specific reason because he just loved the setting.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes they get involved and then the system grows and grows, and it's like, this is the artist of this world, so it becomes a thing, right? So
exactly.
Go ahead, we've got time for about,
So we have-
make them quick, we got 3 and this is it.
Yeah,
So
I'm
we
gonna
got 5
say
minutes.
no more questions other than the 3 that are up there. We're gonna zip through them as quickly as possible.
So very quickly, can you just talk about how you play test games?
So my very first game I play tested, and it was me in my game shop trying to find random people to drag over to my table. Nowadays, I send out a blurb on G+ or Facebook, and I say, does anybody want to play test this? And I'll get 10 people who will say yes. And maybe 4 of them will give me usable feedback. Because that's kind of the thing with playtesting, is that sometimes people will say yes, they want to play test, but really it just means they want to read your stuff before it's released and not actually give you any real feedback. But I have a couple of really good groups that I have that have play tested for me before, so a lot of the time I'm able to tap them and say, hey, I have this new thing, can you get it back to me in a week? And they'll be like, yes, we'll run it right now, you know, and they will tear it apart. I love those groups the most, the ones that they will just tear it apart, and I'll be like, thank you.
I have another licensing question.
Sure.
My friends were looking into publishing a game, and they understood that certain dice system and dice were copyrighted by Wizards. Is that true?
Well, I think Wizards has the D20 system, and right?
Yeah, you couldn't call it D20, right? Because you'd have to do the OGL for the
Right.
open gaming license. But I mean, I think dice are dice. I
Yeah,
mean,
dice
they
are
don't-
dice.
They don't own the dice themselves. I mean,
They have
probably.
a font. They have a font on some of the dice.
And specific icons that you probably.
Yeah,
Talking
and
about
icons
fancy
and
flight
stuff.
dice.
Yeah.
So you were.
But
Yeah, there are dice that are patented and they have duration. Some of them have just expired, like, you know,
Oh, okay.
for so many years, right? So
And you
there
could-
are specific dice that get patented. Like
if you use the standard dice, though, I think you'll be just fine.
Well, like Crystal Case, they have the, spindle dice and stuff like that, yeah. But like I think the D30, some of you may have seen one of those. That was a patented dice for dragons back in the day. It's called a dragon dice, but I think that's kind of gone away.
I saw a
now.
D7 once. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
All right, for somebody who's completely new to gaming, trying to produce an electronic game, what toolkits, and they have no programming background, what toolkits would you suggest they start with?
Toolkits for
the
publishing your
electron-
own game?
Yeah, creating their own game, and eventually want to put it online.
Okay.
Yeah, like a video game, card-based.
Okay, so you're talking about an app, or you're talking about a web-based?
It can work either way. Yeah, probably an app.
I am the wrong person to ask about.
Yeah, that's kind of the wrong group, but it depends on what you're programming for. I mean, HTML, right? HTML5 would be web-based. You're going to write it in C# or whatever you're going to write it into. If you're dealing with Apple, for example, you're going to use Swift or Objective-C, which was their original setup. I write specifically in Swift, but then you've got the whole Android platform. Just go out and look for the words SDK, software development kit, and you'll find a ton of them. And there's tons of places that you can get this stuff online that you can buy like a how-to thing. And usually these aren't great, but there's some of them have like they'll show you step by step how to do this in a specific program. But if you have no coding language whatsoever, it's going to be kind of difficult because HTML, which is web-based, is not a language, right? It's it's a markup language. It's not a code. So and then C#, C++, C, any of the C bases, which is going to include Java. My suggestion would probably be C++ to kind of get into that whole world, because that's going to get you. Yeah. So,
I was gonna say, did anybody else's eyes just like glaze over entirely? Like, I have no clue what you guys are talking about.
There is a mobile app development panel at the video game track right after this.
Oh, there you go.
They'll have all your answers.
That's gonna be the one for you.
So guys, thanks for a great panel.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
keep it up, and,